I thought I was losing my mind when I checked my security cameras from my hotel room in Denver. There, on my living room footage, were my parents, Robert and Linda, along with my younger brother Tyler, casually discussing their plan to move him into my house while I was away on business. Once everything is here, she won't make a scene. She'll just accept it, my mother said, apparently confusing me for my ex-girlfriend who used to live there. My blood ran cold as I realized they planned to break in tomorrow while I was supposed to be gone for 3 more days. I sat frozen in my hotel bed, watching my own family plot against me through grainy security footage. The timestamp showed this conversation happened just 2 hours ago, and I could barely believe what I was hearing through my laptop speakers. Tyler paced around my living room like he already owned the place, pointing at different corners while explaining his vision for rearranging my furniture. "The couch needs to go there so I can see the TV from the kitchen," he said, gesturing wildly. "And that bookshelf is blocking the perfect spot for my gaming setup." My father Robert nodded along, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. "Son, you sure about this? Brayden worked real hard to buy this place." "Dad, she's never even here," Tyler replied, and I realized with growing horror that they genuinely believed my ex-girlfriend Jessica still lived with me. Jessica and I had broken up 8 months ago, but apparently my family had somehow missed that crucial detail. Besides, I checked her work schedule. She pulls those 12-hour shifts at the hospital 3 times a week, and she's always going to Portland on weekends. My mother Linda sat on my couch, flipping through a notebook that I now recognized as my personal planner that I kept on the kitchen counter. "I've been tracking her patterns for 2 months, sweetie. She leaves every Friday evening and doesn't come back until Sunday night. During the week, she's gone from 6 in the morning until 8 at night. 2 months. They'd been surveilling me for 2 months. The timing is perfect," Linda continued, her voice taking on that manipulative tone I remembered from childhood when she wanted something. "We move your stuff in while she's in Denver, and by the time she gets back, you're already settled." "What's she going to do, call the police on family?" Tyler laughed, but there was a desperate edge to it that made my stomach clench. "Mom, I really need this to work out. Those guys I owe money to, they're not patient people. $15,000 might not seem like much to someone with a house like this, but they want it now. $15,000. Tyler owed someone $15,000. "How did you even get into this mess, son?" Robert asked, his voice heavy with disappointment. Tyler's shoulders sagged. "It started small, Dad. Just some online poker, then sports betting. I thought I could win it back. But," he trailed off, running his hands through his hair. "Then I started using some other methods to get the money, and things got complicated." "Other methods?" I felt a chill run down my spine. "What kind of other methods?" Linda asked sharply. Tyler glanced around nervously, as if checking for eavesdroppers in my own house. "I might have used some information I found lying around here. Credit card numbers, social security stuff. Nothing major, Mom. Just enough to buy myself some time." My heart stopped. Tyler had been stealing my identity. Linda stood up abruptly. "Tyler James, you tell me you didn't use your sister's information for gambling." "She's not my sister, Mom, and it was just temporary. I was going to pay it all back before she ever found out. But then the guys I owe money to got impatient, and now they want everything at once." I watched my mother close her eyes and take a deep breath, the same way she used to when Tyler got in trouble as a kid. "How long has this been going on? Maybe 3 months? I only used the credit cards a few times, and I've been having some mail sent here, so I could intercept the bills. She never checks her mail anyway." 3 months. Tyler had been committing identity theft using my information for 3 months, and my parents were about to help him cover it up by moving him into my house. "This is why we need to get you settled here," Robert said, his voice resigned. "If you're living here legitimately, we can tell anyone who asks that you have permission to be here. Your sister will just have to understand that family comes first." I wanted to scream that I wasn't anyone's sister, that I was their son Brayden who had worked 60-hour weeks for 3 years to save up for this house. But they were so convinced that Jessica still lived here, so certain in their delusion, that I began to wonder if they were experiencing some kind of shared psychotic break. "I've already made copies of the spare key she keeps under the flower pot," Linda said, pulling a set of keys from her purse. And I've been telling the neighbors that Brayden's girlfriend gave us permission to help Tyler move in while she's away. Mrs. Patterson next door was so sweet about it, said she'd keep an eye on things. The twist that made my blood run cold came when Tyler walked over to my kitchen counter and picked up a stack of mail I hadn't seen before. "Mom, these came today," he said, handing her several official-looking envelopes. "Looks like more credit card bills." Linda examined them carefully. "I'll take care of these, honey. We can't have her seeing these before you're settled in. Once you're living here, we'll figure out how to handle the money situation." They were intercepting my mail. They were stealing my mail to hide evidence of Tyler's crimes. I sat in that hotel room, 600 miles away, watching my family destroy my life through a security camera, and I realized that tomorrow they planned to complete their invasion of my home. The worst part was that they genuinely believed they were helping Tyler while protecting some imaginary girlfriend who didn't even exist anymore. I had less than 18 hours to figure out how to stop them. Sleep was impossible that night. I spent hours scrolling through weeks of archived footage, and each new discovery made my stomach turn. This wasn't just about Tyler needing a place to stay. This was a systematic violation that had been going on for months. The earliest footage I could find dated back to February, 3 months after Jessica and I had broken up. My mother appeared on camera, letting herself into my house with a key I never knew she had. She walked through my rooms like she owned them, opening drawers, looking through papers, even photographing documents with her phone. In one particularly disturbing video from March, I watched Linda sit at my kitchen table, carefully opening and reading my personal mail before sealing it back up. She had been intercepting letters from my therapist's office, my bank statements, even my medical bills. I realized she knew more about my personal life than I had shared with anyone. The violation felt overwhelming, but what came next was worse. During a video from April, I found footage of Linda in my bedroom, going through my dresser drawers and examining the prescription bottles on my nightstand. She photographed the labels of my anxiety medication and made notes in a small journal. "Perfect," I heard her whisper to herself. "This will help if we need to prove he's not thinking clearly." They were building a case against my mental health. I fast-forwarded through more footage and found a conversation between my parents from just last week. They sat in my living room discussing strategy like military generals planning an invasion. "The therapist visits are documented going back 8 months, Linda explained to Robert, consulting her notebook. "If Brayden objects to Tyler moving in, we can tell the family that the stress has been affecting his judgment. We have photographic proof that he's on anxiety medication." "You think the boy would really fight us on helping his brother?" Robert asked. "Robert, you know how selfish she's always been. Remember how she reacted when we asked her to co-sign Tyler's car loan? She made it all about her credit score and her future plans. No consideration for family loyalty." I stared at the screen in disbelief. They were talking about me, but they kept using female pronouns. Somehow, in their minds, I had become Jessica, and Jessica had become this selfish, unstable person who needed to be managed and controlled. The most chilling discovery came in footage from just 5 days ago. Tyler appeared on camera alone, and I watched him systematically go through my home office, photographing financial documents and copying information from my computer. He made phone calls using my landline, identifying himself as Brayden Williams and discussing account information with what sounded like creditors. "Yeah, my sister said I could use this address," Tyler said during one call. "She travels a lot for work, so I handle her mail and stuff. Can you send the new cards here?" Perfect. Tyler had been living a double life, using my identity to open credit accounts while telling creditors that I was his sister who had given him permission to manage my affairs. The complexity of the deception was staggering, but the truly devastating discovery came in a video from 2 weeks ago. I watched Tyler bring 3 other people into my house, strangers who looked through my belongings while discussing which items would be valuable enough to sell. "The TV's probably worth $800, one of them said. A thin man with tattoos covering his arms. "And that computer set up in the office, that's easily $1,500. "We can't take anything obvious," Tyler replied nervously. "Not until I'm living here officially. But once my parents get me moved in, we'll have access to everything." Tyler wasn't just planning to live in my house. He was planning to sell my possessions to pay his gambling debts. The conversation continued, and I learned that Tyler owed money to multiple people, not just the $15,000 he had mentioned to our parents. The total debt was closer to $40,000. And these people weren't just fellow gamblers. They were dangerous individuals who had threatened violence if Tyler didn't pay up soon. Your sister's got good credit, the tattooed man continued. My buddy Jake runs credit scams. And he says accounts like hers can be worth 30 grand easy if you know how to work them. She'll never know, Tyler assured him. My mom's been handling her mail for months, and we've got her patterns figured out. She's predictable as clockwork. I realized then that this wasn't just about family desperation or misguided help. Tyler had introduced criminal associates into my home, and they were planning to use my house as a base of operations for identity theft and fraud. The final video I watched before dawn showed Tyler meeting with a man in an expensive suit who clearly wasn't another gambler. They sat in my living room while this stranger took notes about my daily routine. The key is establishing residency, the suit-wearing man explained. If your parents support your claim that you live here with permission, and you can produce mail and utility bills as evidence, then legally speaking, you have tenant rights. Even if your sister objects later, she'd have to go through formal eviction proceedings, which takes months. Tyler was working with a lawyer to fraudulently establish legal residency in my home. What about the identity issues? Tyler asked nervously. As long as you're living here legitimately, any financial complications can be explained as family arrangements. Brothers help sisters with credit problems all the time. By the time anyone sorts out who authorized what, you'll be protected by tenant laws. I finally understood the full scope of what I was facing. This wasn't just a family boundary issue or a misunderstanding about Jessica still living with me. This was an organized conspiracy involving identity theft, mail fraud, and fraudulent residency claims, orchestrated by my own family and enabled by my parents' delusion about who actually lived in my house. As dawn broke over Denver, I realized that in 12 hours, Tyler would arrive with a moving truck. My parents would help him break into my home, and I would lose everything I had worked for. But now I knew exactly what they were planning, and I had evidence of crimes that went far beyond simple trespassing. The question was whether I could get home in time to stop them, or if I was already too late. I called Sarah from the airport bathroom, my hands shaking as I dialed her number. My flight back to Portland wasn't scheduled until tomorrow evening, but I had managed to catch an earlier connection that would get me home by noon. Brayden? Sarah's voice sounded confused. I thought you weren't supposed to call during your business trip. Your mom said you were going through a rough patch and needed some space to think. My heart sank. When did you talk to my mother? Yesterday morning. She called me at work, said she was worried about your mental state, and asked if I'd noticed any concerning behavior lately. She mentioned that you'd been seeing a therapist for anxiety and that the family was concerned about your decision-making. Linda had contacted Sarah at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. What did she tell you exactly? She said you'd been acting paranoid and making impulsive decisions, and that this business trip was actually a cover story because you were having some kind of breakdown. She asked me not to contact you while you were away, said it would be better for your mental health if you had time to think without external pressure. I closed my eyes, feeling the walls closing in around me. Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I haven't been having a breakdown. I've been discovering that my family has been committing crimes in my house for months. Crimes? Brayden, what are you talking about? I spent 10 minutes explaining what I had found on the security footage. Watching passengers walk past the bathroom door, while I described my family's systematic invasion of my privacy. Sarah listened in growing disbelief. They think I'm Jessica, I concluded. Somehow they've convinced themselves that she still lives with me, and they've been planning Tyler's move based on that delusion. That's insane, Brayden. We've been dating for 6 months. I've met your parents multiple times. Have you? When was the last time you actually saw them? Sarah paused, thinking. Christmas dinner at your house. But we only stayed for an hour because you said you weren't feeling well. I remembered that day. My parents had seemed confused about Sarah's presence, asking pointed questions about Jessica and when she was coming back from her work trip. At the time, I had assumed they were just having difficulty accepting that Jessica and I had broken up. Since then, what contact have you had with my family? I asked. Just phone calls with your mother. She calls me every few weeks to check in. Asks about your mood and whether you've been sleeping well. I thought it was sweet that she cared so much about your well-being. Linda had been monitoring me through Sarah, gathering information about my mental state to support their narrative that I was unstable and needed family intervention. Sarah, I need your help. They're planning to move Tyler into my house today while I'm supposedly still in Denver. Can you drive over there and see what's happening? Of course, but Brayden, this all sounds really paranoid. Are you sure you're not misinterpreting what you saw? The doubt in her voice made my chest tighten. Linda's manipulation was working even on Sarah, someone who knew me well and cared about me. Check your phone for missed calls, I said. If my parents are really concerned about my mental health, wouldn't they have tried to contact you directly about this supposed breakdown? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Actually, your mother specifically asked me not to mention our conversations to you. She said it would make your paranoia worse if you knew the family was discussing your mental health. Classic manipulation tactics. Isolate the target by controlling information flow and creating doubt about their perceptions. I'll drive to your house right now, Sarah said, her voice becoming more decisive. If nothing unusual is happening, then we'll figure out why you're seeing things that aren't there. If you're right about what's happening, then we'll deal with it together. After hanging up, I tried to call my Uncle Dave, my father's brother who had always been the most reasonable member of our family. Uncle Dave was a retired police detective who had helped me navigate legal issues when I bought my house. Brayden, Dave's voice was warm but concerned. How are you holding up, son? Your mother called me yesterday, said you've been having a hard time lately. My stomach dropped. What did she tell you? She's worried about your mental state. Said you've been making paranoid accusations about the family, and that Tyler's been trying to help you manage your finances because you've been making poor decisions. She mentioned you're seeing a therapist for anxiety, and that the stress might be affecting your judgment. The web of lies was vast. Linda had contacted every important person in my life, preparing them to doubt my credibility if I tried to expose what was happening. Dave, I need you to listen to me without making any judgments about my mental state. I have security camera footage of Tyler and my parents planning to break into my house today. I also have evidence that Tyler has been committing identity theft, using my information for months. Uncle Dave was quiet for a long moment. Son, those are serious accusations. Are you absolutely certain about what you saw? I have hours of footage. Tyler admitted on camera to using my credit cards and having mail sent to my address. My parents have been entering my house without permission for months, going through my personal belongings and photographing my medical information. If that's true, then we're talking about multiple felonies, Dave said, his voice shifting into his old detective tone. But Brayden, your mother was very convincing about your mental state. She showed me copies of prescription bottles and therapy appointment cards. She said you've been paranoid about family members stealing from you. They had physical evidence to support their claims about my mental instability. Linda had photographed my anxiety medication and therapy documents to create proof that I was unreliable. Dave, I'm going to email you video files from my security system. I need you to watch them and tell me if I'm hallucinating conversations about identity theft and breaking into my house. All right, son. Send me what you have, and I'll take a look with fresh eyes. But Brayden, if you're right about this, then your parents aren't just misguided. They're actively participating in criminal behavior. As I boarded my connecting flight, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Just drove by your house. There's a moving truck in your driveway, and several people carrying furniture inside. Your parents are there directing traffic. This is really happening. The trap I had planned to set was already too late. Tyler was moving into my house right now, and my parents were helping him do it. Worse, they had spent months destroying my credibility with everyone who might have helped me stop them. I realized that even if I could prove what was happening, the damage was already done. Tyler was establishing residency in my home with apparent family support. My credit had likely been compromised for months, and everyone in my life had been primed to believe that any objection I raised was evidence of mental instability. I was still 2 hours away from home, and my family was completing their invasion of my life. I arrived home to find my worst fears realized. A large moving truck sat in my driveway, and I could see my parents directing 2 men as they carried Tyler's furniture through my front door. My carefully planned trap had already failed before I could even implement it. I parked down the street and called Sarah. I'm here. What have you seen? Tyler's been here for 2 hours with professional movers. she said. Your parents keep telling the neighbors that his sister gave him permission to move in while she's away on business. Mrs. Patterson brought them lemonade. My neighbors believed the story. In their minds, Jessica's brother was moving in with family support, and I was out of town on a business trip. I had planned to catch my family in the act of breaking and entering, but they had circumvented that by using the spare key and presenting their actions as legitimate family assistants. Instead of criminals, they looked like helpful relatives managing a normal moving situation. Sarah, I need you to create a distraction so I can get into my house unseen. I want to confront them with evidence before they can spin this situation any further. Are you sure that's smart? Maybe we should call the police and let them handle it. And tell them what? That my family is helping my brother move into a house where they claim he has permission to live? Without proof of the identity theft and mail fraud? This just looks like a family dispute. As I sat in my car planning my next move, everything went catastrophically wrong. A black sedan pulled up behind the moving truck, and 3 men in expensive suits got out. They moved with the predatory confidence of people accustomed to intimidating others, and I immediately knew these were Tyler's creditors. I watched in horror as the largest of the 3 men approached my father, who was supervising the movers near my front porch. The conversation started calmly, but I could see tension building in my father's posture. Then Tyler emerged from my house, saw the men, and his face went white with panic. "Where's our money, Tyler?" the large man said, his voice carrying across the yard. "You said your sister would handle the debt once you moved in with her." My parents looked confused, clearly not understanding who these men were or what debt they were referring to. "She's not here yet," Tyler stammered. "She's supposed to be back tonight, and then we'll sort everything out." "That's not what we agreed," a second man said, stepping closer to Tyler. "You said you'd have our $40,000 today. Not some story about your sister coming home later." $40,000. The debt was even larger than I had realized from the security footage. "Boys, I think there's been some confusion," my father said, trying to position himself between Tyler and the creditors. "This is my son, and he's moving into his sister's house with permission. There shouldn't be any debts involved." The large man laughed coldly. "Your son has been gambling with our money for 6 months and using his sister's credit to cover his losses. We don't care about family permission. We want our cash." I could see the exact moment when my parents realized they had walked into something far more dangerous than they understood. Linda emerged from my house carrying a box, took one look at the situation, and dropped everything. "Tyler, what did you do?" she whispered. But Tyler was already panicking. Instead of explaining the situation to his creditors, he made a desperate decision that turned everything into a complete disaster. "The money's inside," he told the creditors, pointing at my house. "My sister keeps cash in a safe, and I know the combination. Just give me 5 minutes." Tyler ran toward my house with 3 dangerous criminals following him, while my parents stood frozen in shock on the front lawn. I watched Tyler break the small decorative window next to my front door to reach the deadbolt from inside. The sound of breaking glass carried across the neighborhood, and I saw Mrs. Patterson peek through her curtains with obvious concern. The creditors pushed past my parents and followed Tyler into my house, where I could hear shouting and the sound of furniture being overturned as they searched for money that didn't exist. "We need to call the police," Linda said to Robert, her voice shaking. "And tell them what?" Robert replied. "That our son brought dangerous people into his sister's house to look for money, to pay gambling debts? We'll all be in trouble." The situation deteriorated rapidly when the creditors realized Tyler had lied about there being money in the house. They emerged furious, with Tyler looking bruised and terrified. "You set us up," the large man said, grabbing Tyler by the shirt. "There's no safe, no sister, and no money. You've been playing us for months." That's when Tyler made his final, desperate mistake. "She must have moved the money," Tyler said, pointing directly at my parents. "Ask them. They know where my sister keeps her valuables." Tyler had just made his terrified, elderly parents targets of violent criminals who were already angry about being deceived. I reached for my phone to call 911, but before I could dial, I heard sirens in the distance. Someone else had already called the police about the breaking glass and shouting. Within minutes, 2 police cars pulled up to my house, and I watched officers approach a scene that looked like chaos. A moving truck, broken glass, 3 suspicious men in suits, my terrified parents, and Tyler with obvious signs of physical altercation. But instead of resolving the situation, the police presence made everything worse. Tyler, desperate to avoid being arrested in front of violent creditors, told the officers that he lived in the house and had accidentally locked himself out. He showed them mail with his name and my address as proof of residency. "This is my house," Tyler told the police confidently. "These gentlemen were helping me move some furniture, and I accidentally broke the window trying to get inside when I couldn't find my keys." My parents, terrified of the creditors and confused about how to explain the situation, supported Tyler's story. "That's right," Linda said quickly. "This is my son Tyler, and his sister gave him permission to live here while she's away on business." The police looked around at the moving truck, the mail evidence, and the family supporting Tyler's claim to residency. Without any obvious signs of a crime in progress, they seemed inclined to treat this as a civil matter. But the creditors weren't finished with Tyler. As the police were taking statements, the large man approached the officers. "Officers, this man owes our organization a substantial amount of money, and we have reason to believe he's using fraudulent identification to avoid his debts. We'd like to file a complaint." Suddenly, the police were dealing with accusations of fraud, identity theft, and debt collection gone wrong, all centered on my house that I couldn't even access without appearing to support Tyler's claims about living there. I sat in my car half a block away, watching my trap completely backfire. Instead of catching my family in a simple breaking and entering, I had stumbled into a situation involving violent criminals, fraudulent residency claims, and police who were trying to sort out competing stories about who actually lived in my house. And I was still too far away to intervene without making the situation even worse. The police situation spiraled out of control faster than I could have imagined. From my car, I watched Officer Martinez question Tyler while Officer Chen spoke with the creditors. My parents huddled together on my front lawn, looking elderly and fragile in a way that made my chest ache despite everything they had done. Tyler's performance was disturbingly convincing. He showed the officers utilities bills, credit card statements, and medical correspondence, all with his name and my address. The identity theft had been so thorough that he had legitimate-looking documentation to support his claim of living in my house. "See, officer, this is clearly my residence," Tyler said, pointing to an electric bill. "I've been getting mail here for months, and my parents can verify that my sister gave me permission to move in permanently while she travels for work." Officer Martinez nodded, examining the documents. "And where is your sister now?" "Denver. On business. She's a software consultant and travels constantly. That's why I'm here to maintain the property and handle her mail." Even Tyler's lies contained enough truth to be believable. "I was in Denver. I was a software engineer who occasionally traveled for work." And Tyler had indeed been receiving mail at my address. Linda stepped forward, her voice shaking but determined. "Officer, this is all a family arrangement. My daughter asked Tyler to live here because she's never home, and someone needs to take care of the house. I realized my parents were so deep in their delusion about Jessica still living with me that they genuinely believed their own story. In their minds, they were telling the truth about family arrangements and caretaking responsibilities. But the creditors weren't backing down. "Officers, this man has been using his sister's identity to open credit accounts," the large man said, producing his own documentation. "We have loan agreements signed with the name Brayden Williams, but this individual has been representing himself as both Brayden and Tyler, depending on the situation." Officer Chen frowned, comparing the creditor's paperwork with Tyler's identification. "Sir, your ID says Tyler Williams, but these loan documents are for Brayden Williams. Can you explain that?" Tyler's confident facade cracked. "Brayden is my sister. Sometimes I handle her financial affairs when she's traveling. It's a family arrangement." "Your sister's name is Brayden?" Officer Martinez asked, clearly confused. "She goes by Brayden professionally," Linda interjected quickly. "Her birth name is different, but she uses Brayden for work. It's a family name." I watched in disbelief as my parents constructed an elaborate fiction about me being a woman named Brayden who traveled constantly for work and had asked Tyler to manage my affairs. The delusion was so complete that they seemed to believe their own story, but the creditors had done their homework. Officers, we have surveillance footage of our interactions with Tyler Williams, the second creditor said, producing a tablet. In every conversation, he refers to Brayden as his sister, but the credit applications and bank accounts are clearly for a male individual named Brayden Williams who lives at this address. Officer Chen reviewed the footage while Tyler grew increasingly agitated. The truth is, this individual has been running a sophisticated identity theft operation, using both his own name and his sister's name to open fraudulent accounts. That's not true, Tyler shouted, his composure finally breaking. I live here legitimately. Ask my parents. But shouting at police officers while under suspicion of fraud was exactly the wrong move. Officer Martinez stepped closer to Tyler, his hand resting on his handcuffs. Sir, I'm going to need you to calm down. We're trying to sort out who actually lives here and who has permission to be on this property. That's when I made my fatal mistake. I couldn't watch my elderly parents being terrorized by criminals and questioned by police because of my brother's crimes. Despite knowing that revealing myself would complicate everything, I got out of my car and walked toward my house. Officers, I called out, pulling my ID from my wallet. I'm Brayden Williams, and this is my house. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Tyler spun around with a look of pure panic. Brayden, you're supposed to be in Denver until Friday. The creditors turned their attention to me with predatory interest. Well, the famous sister who's been avoiding us. You're the homeowner? Officer Martinez asked, examining my driver's license and comparing it to the address on the house. Yes, and I never gave anyone permission to move into my house or use my identity for loan applications. I thought revealing myself would clarify the situation. But it made everything infinitely worse. The largest creditor approached me with a smile that made my blood run cold. Brayden Williams. We've been looking forward to meeting you. Your brother Tyler has been very creative with our money, but ultimately, you're responsible for his debts. I'm not responsible for anyone's gambling debts, I said firmly. Actually, you are, the second creditor said, showing his tablet to the police officers. We have signed loan agreements, credit applications, and recorded phone conversations where Tyler Williams, acting as your authorized representative, committed you to substantial financial obligations. Officer Chen reviewed the evidence with growing concern. Sir, these documents do appear to show your brother conducting financial business in your name with your apparent authorization. Tyler had been so thorough in his identity theft that he had created a paper trail, making it appear that I had authorized his actions. I never authorized anything, I protested. This is identity theft, mail fraud, and breaking and entering. But the creditors weren't interested in legal technicalities. The bottom line, the large man said, stepping closer to me, is that $40,000 of our money was borrowed in your name, from your address, by someone claiming to represent your interests. We don't care about family disputes. We want our money. You need to leave my property immediately, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The creditor laughed. Your property? Look around. Your brother is living here with family support. He has documentation proving residency, and he owes us money that was borrowed using your information. From our perspective, you're both responsible for the debt. Officer Martinez stepped between us. Everyone needs to calm down. We're going to sort this out systematically. But sorting it out systematically was exactly what I couldn't afford. The longer this situation continued, the more entrenched Tyler's fraudulent residency claim became, and the more legitimate his creditors' claims appeared. Officers, I have security camera footage showing my family breaking into my house and planning this entire scenario, I said desperately. Tyler's face went white. She's paranoid, officer. She's been seeing a therapist for anxiety and making wild accusations about the family for months. Mom, show them the medication. Linda, still convinced she was protecting her children, pulled out her phone and showed the officers photographs of my prescription bottles and therapy appointment cards. My daughter has been struggling with paranoid thoughts, Linda said sadly. The therapist suggested that stress from work was affecting her judgment about family relationships. I stared at my mother in shock. She wasn't just supporting Tyler's lies. She genuinely believed that I was an unstable woman named Brayden, who was having paranoid delusions about family members stealing from me. Officer Chen looked at the prescription photos, then at me, then at Tyler's residency documents. This is getting complicated. We may need to involve social services and have a mental health evaluation." The creditors exchanged glances, clearly realizing that if I was declared mentally unfit, collecting their debt would become much more difficult. "We're not waiting for family therapy," the large man said coldly. $40,000, plus interest, by midnight tonight, or we start taking collateral." "What kind of collateral?" Officer Martinez asked sharply. The creditor gestured around my property. "Valuable items. Electronics. Whatever we can find to cover the debt." I realized that my trap hadn't just failed. It had created a situation where violent criminals now had legal, seeming justification for ransacking my house while police watched, because Tyler had successfully established fraudulent residency, and my parents were supporting his claims while portraying me as mentally unstable. Everything was falling apart faster than I could think of solutions. Standing in my own driveway while police officers questioned my mental stability and criminals threatened to seize my possessions, I felt completely powerless. But then I remembered that I wasn't facing this alone, and I had resources my family didn't know about. "Officer Martinez," I said, keeping my voice as calm and professional as possible, "I need to call my attorney. This situation involves multiple federal crimes, and I have extensive documentation that will clarify who's telling the truth." Tyler's confidence faltered. "Brayden, don't make this harder than it needs to be. We're family." "Federal crimes?" Officer Chen asked, suddenly more attentive. "Identity theft, mail fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and breaking and entering," I said, pulling out my phone. "I have security camera footage documenting months of criminal activity, and I have witnesses who can verify the timeline." I called Marcus Rodriguez, my lawyer friend who specialized in criminal defense. Marcus and I had met in college, and he had helped me navigate the legal paperwork when I bought my house. "Marcus, I need emergency legal assistance. I'm standing in front of my house with police officers, and my family has been committing federal crimes using my property as their base of operations." "Brayden? Where are you exactly?" Marcus's voice shifted into professional mode. "My front yard, with Portland police officers, Martinez and Chen. My brother has been committing identity theft for months, and my parents just helped him establish fraudulent residency in my house. There are also some very dangerous people here demanding $40,000 they claim I owe them. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Don't sign anything, don't admit to owing anyone money, and don't let anyone remove property from your house." Put me on speaker with the officers. Officer Martinez agreed to speak with Marcus, and I held my phone between us. "Officers, this is Marcus Rodriguez, with Rodriguez and Associates. My client is the sole owner of this property and has never authorized his brother to live there or conduct financial business in his name. We have extensive video evidence of breaking and entering, mail theft, and identity fraud." "Mr. Rodriguez," Officer Chen said, "the situation is complicated because the brother has documentation showing residency, and the parents claim the homeowner has mental health issues affecting his judgment. The documentation is fraudulent, obtained through mail theft and identity fraud. The mental health claims are part of a systematic gaslighting campaign designed to undermine my client's credibility. We'll provide all evidence within the hour." Tyler stepped forward desperately. "Officers, she's just trying to cover up the fact that she authorized me to handle her affairs. She's been unstable for months." That's when Sarah arrived. I saw her car pull up behind the police vehicles, and she got out looking determined and angry. But she wasn't alone. Uncle Dave emerged from the passenger seat, followed by my cousin Amanda, who worked as a prosecutor in the district attorney's office. "Brayden!" Sarah called out, rushing toward me. "Are you okay?" Dave called Amanda as soon as he saw the videos. "You sent him. Send him." "How?" Uncle Dave approached Officer Martinez with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to working with law enforcement. "Officers, I'm retired Portland PD. Detective David Williams. This man is my nephew Brayden, and I've just reviewed hours of security footage showing systematic criminal activity at this address." Amanda stepped forward with a briefcase, her prosecutor credentials visible on her jacket. "Amanda Chen, District Attorney's Office. We have evidence of multiple federal crimes including mail theft, identity fraud, and conspiracy charges. I watched Tyler's face drain of color as he realized that I hadn't been isolated and vulnerable like my parents had believed. Instead of facing one confused person with mental health issues, he was now confronting a retired police detective, an active prosecutor, and a criminal defense attorney. "Dave, what are you doing here?" Linda asked, clearly confused by her brother-in-law's presence. "Brayden called you with those paranoid stories?" Uncle Dave's expression was grim. "Linda, I watched the security footage. I saw you photographing Brayden's medical records. Tyler admitting to identity theft. And both of you planning to gaslight him into accepting criminal activity in his own home. That's not what we were doing," Robert protested. "We were trying to help Tyler get back on his feet by committing federal crimes," Amanda said sharply. "Breaking and entering, mail theft, identity fraud, and conspiracy charges carry serious prison sentences." The creditors, who had been listening to this conversation with growing unease, began to realize they had walked into a law enforcement situation rather than a simple debt collection. "Officers," the large creditor said carefully, "we may have been given false information about the nature of our business relationship with these individuals." Officer Martinez nodded. "Sir, it's becoming clear that the loan agreements you have may be fraudulent documents obtained through identity theft." Tyler made one last desperate attempt to maintain his story. "They're all lying to protect her. She owes that money, and she lives here. Ask the neighbors." But Amanda was already reviewing documents on her tablet. "Tyler Williams, you're under arrest for identity theft, mail fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent." "Wait," Linda cried out, finally understanding that this wasn't going to be resolved with family negotiations. "He's sick. He has gambling problems. He needs help, not prison." Uncle Dave put a gentle hand on his sister-in-law's shoulder. "Linda, Tyler needed help 6 months ago when this started. Now he needs to face the consequences of his choices so he can get the help he actually needs." Officer Chen was already calling for backup and a detective to handle the federal crimes evidence. The creditors, realizing they had been pursuing fraudulent debts, began discussing whether to press charges against Tyler for fraud. Marcus arrived just as Amanda finished reading Tyler his rights. "Brayden, are you hurt? Has anyone threatened you directly?" "The creditors demanded $40,000 and said they'd take collateral from my house if I didn't pay by midnight." Marcus turned to the creditors with the cold professionalism of someone who handled serious criminal cases. "Gentlemen, you've just admitted to threatening extortion against someone who doesn't owe you money. You may want to contact your own attorneys." The tide had completely turned. Instead of being an isolated, mentally unstable person facing family pressure and criminal threats, I was now surrounded by legal professionals who had evidence of the crimes committed against me. Tyler sat in the back of Officer Chen's patrol car, no longer the confident manipulator who had convinced neighbors and creditors that he belonged in my house. My parents stood on my lawn looking elderly and confused, finally beginning to understand the gravity of what they had participated in. The creditors were in their own legal jeopardy, facing possible charges for attempted extortion based on fraudulent debt claims. "The security footage shows everything," Uncle Dave explained to the officers. "Months of breaking and entering, systematic mail theft, identity fraud, and conspiracy to establish fraudulent residency. This wasn't family helping family. This was an organized criminal enterprise." As additional police units arrived to process evidence and take statements, I realized that my trap had ultimately worked, just not the way I had planned. Instead of catching my family in a simple breaking and entering, I had exposed a much larger criminal conspiracy that would finally face proper legal consequences. Tyler would get the intervention he needed, but it would come through the criminal justice system rather than family enabling. My parents would have to confront the reality of their actions and their distorted perceptions about my life. Most importantly, I had learned that I wasn't alone in this fight. When the crisis hit, the people who genuinely cared about me had rallied to help, while the people who claimed to love me had been willing to destroy my life for their own convenience. 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen making dinner for the first time in years, without worrying about who might walk through my door, uninvited. The house felt truly mine again, not because I had changed the locks, but because I had learned the difference between family who loved me and family who wanted to control me. Tyler was serving 18 months in federal prison for identity theft and mail fraud. The sentence included mandatory participation in gambling addiction, treatment, and financial responsibility counseling. The judge had been clear that Tyler needed to face consequences before he could get genuine help, and the structured environment was finally providing him with the intervention he had needed for years. The identity theft charges had been serious enough to involve the FBI, and the investigation had uncovered the full scope of Tyler's crimes. He had opened 17 different credit accounts using my information, accumulated nearly $60,000 in fraudulent debt, and involved at least 8 other people in his schemes. The judge called it one of the most systematic cases of sibling identity theft she had ever seen. My parents had avoided criminal charges by cooperating with the investigation and agreeing to make full restitution for damages. But they had faced something potentially more difficult: complete exposure of their delusions and manipulative behavior to our entire extended family. Uncle Dave had insisted on family meetings where Linda and Robert were forced to confront video evidence of their actions. Watching themselves on camera, systematically invading my privacy, and building a fictional narrative about my mental health had been devastating for them. "We honestly thought we were protecting you," Linda had told me during one painful conversation. "In our minds, you were Jessica, and Jessica was this fragile girl who needed our help managing her life. We convinced ourselves that Tyler moving in would be good for both of you." The psychology behind their delusion had been complex. After Jessica and I broke up, my parents had struggled to accept that their image of my life was wrong. Rather than adjusting their understanding, they had created an elaborate fiction where Jessica still lived with me but traveled constantly, and I had somehow become Jessica in their minds. "The therapist said we've been engaging in collaborative delusion," Robert explained. "We reinforced each other's false beliefs until we couldn't tell the difference between what we wanted to be true and what was actually happening." Court-ordered family therapy had been mandatory as part of their plea agreement, and it had forced them to confront not just their recent actions, but decades of boundary violations and manipulative behavior. Learning to see me as an adult capable of making my own decisions had been surprisingly difficult for them. The creditors had faced their own legal consequences. The debt collection company had been operating with questionable practices, using intimidation tactics that crossed legal lines. After being exposed to federal investigation, they had agreed to settle civil lawsuits rather than face criminal charges for attempted extortion. My credit had been completely restored through the identity theft recovery process, and I had actually emerged from the situation with better financial protections than before. The identity monitoring services, credit freezes, and legal documentation now made it nearly impossible for anyone to misuse my information in the future. But the most important changes had been in my relationships with people who genuinely cared about me. Sarah and I had grown much closer through the crisis. Seeing how quickly she had rallied to help me, despite my mother's attempts to undermine her trust, had shown me what real partnership looked like. "I should have questioned your mother's phone calls earlier," Sarah had told me. "But she was so convincing about being worried for your well-being. It felt natural to respect a mother's concern for her child. She's had decades of practice, manipulating people through fake concern," I had replied. "The fact that you eventually saw through it and came to help shows your real character." Uncle Dave and cousin Amanda had become much more central figures in my life. Having family members who respected my autonomy and defended my boundaries had shown me what healthy family relationships could look like. "Your parents love you, but they never learned to love you as an adult," Uncle Dave had explained. "They got stuck seeing you as a child who needed their management, and when reality didn't match their expectations, they changed reality rather than changing their assumptions." The extended family relationships had been permanently altered by the revelations about Tyler's crimes and our parents' enabling behavior. Family gatherings now included open conversations about boundaries, accountability, and the difference between helping someone and enabling their destructive choices. Tyler himself had been writing letters from prison, and his tone had changed dramatically as he worked through addiction treatment and faced the reality of his actions. "Brayden, I know I can't undo what I did to your life," one recent letter had said. "But I want you to know that I finally understand how sick my thinking had become. I convinced myself that taking from you was justified because I needed help, but really I was just stealing from someone who loved me because I knew you wouldn't fight back. The honesty was painful but necessary." Tyler was finally taking responsibility for his choices rather than blaming circumstances or asking family members to enable his behavior. The counselors here say that I used your kindness against you, and that's something I have to live with. When I get out, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to show you through my actions that I'm becoming someone worth forgiving. Reading his letters, I could see genuine change happening, the kind of real transformation that only occurred when someone faced consequences rather than being rescued from them. My house had become the sanctuary I had always intended it to be. I hosted dinners for friends who respected my space, had Sarah stay over whenever she wanted, and enjoyed the simple pleasure of coming home to a place that was truly mine. The security system remained active, not because I expected more family invasions, but because I had learned the value of protecting what I had built. The cameras that had exposed my family's crimes now served as guardians of my peace of mind. Most importantly, I had learned to trust my own perceptions and defend my own boundaries. The months of gaslighting and manipulation had taught me to recognize when people were trying to make me doubt my own reality. The biggest lesson, I had told my therapist, is that enabling people doesn't help them. When I failed to set boundaries with Tyler's behavior, I actually made it easier for him to destroy his life. Real love sometimes requires letting people face consequences. Today was Thanksgiving, and I was hosting dinner for the first time in years. The guest list was small but meaningful. Sarah, Uncle Dave, Amanda and her husband, and two close friends from work who had become like chosen family. My parents had asked if they could join us, and after consultation with my therapist and considerable thought, I had agreed to let them come for dessert only. Not because I was ready for full reconciliation, but because I wanted to practice maintaining boundaries with people I cared about. They arrived exactly when invited, brought the requested dessert without adding anything extra, and spent 2 hours participating in conversation, without trying to manage or control anyone else's experience. It was a small step, but it represented genuine progress in their ability to respect my autonomy. Tyler remained in prison, but he had sent a letter that I read aloud to the group. I won't be with you all today, but I'm grateful that Brayden is surrounded by people who love him correctly. I'm learning what that means through the hardest lesson possible, and I hope someday I can be someone who deserves to be at your table again. As we sat around my dining room table, sharing food and conversation in a space that was finally safe and peaceful, I reflected on how much my life had changed. I had learned that real family members respect your boundaries rather than violating them. I had discovered that people who genuinely love you will support your decisions even when they don't understand them. Most importantly, I had realized that protecting yourself from manipulation isn't selfish. It's necessary for creating space where healthy relationships can flourish. The trap I had set for my family had ultimately caught something much more valuable than evidence of their crimes. It had caught the truth about who they really were, and who I needed to become to protect myself and the people I truly cared about. Standing in my kitchen later that evening, washing dishes while Sarah dried them, and Uncle Dave told stories that made everyone laugh, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete peace in my own home. The house was quiet except for the sounds of friendship and genuine care. No one was planning to manipulate me, steal from me, or gaslight me into doubting my own reality. The people around me had earned their place in my life through respect, honesty, and mutual support. That was the real victory. Not just stopping the people who had betrayed me, but learning to recognize and nurture the relationships that made life worth living. As I prepared for bed that night, I thought about the question that had haunted me 6 months ago. How do you protect yourself from people who claim to love you but whose actions cause you harm? The answer had been simpler than I expected. You protect yourself by choosing to believe people's actions rather than their words, by insisting on accountability rather than accepting excuses, and by surrounding yourself with people who demonstrate love through respect rather than control. Tyler would eventually have the opportunity to rebuild our relationship on healthier terms. My parents were learning to show love in ways that honored my autonomy rather than violating it, and I had discovered that setting boundaries didn't push away the people who truly mattered. It created space for authentic relationships to flourish. The trap had worked better than I ever imagined, not because it caught criminals in my house, but because it revealed the truth about who belonged in my life and who needed to earn their way back through genuine change. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family members crossed boundaries in the name of helping? How did you handle people who claimed to love you while their actions caused harm? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family, boundaries, and standing up for yourself. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of healthy family boundaries, please share this story with them. Thank you for listening, and remember, protecting your peace isn't selfish. It's necessary for building the life you deserve. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the people who truly take care of you.